I'm Jay, your DM.
Alrighty then. We're not here, it's fine.
No, I did mine, you do yours.
I can't!
Hello, I'm Acting Crimes. Or Air, if you prefer.
I'm Jaraika.
And this is Insight Check, where we delve into the dungeon of your bad decisions and retrieve the treasure of wisdom. Alright, everybody, we are back together again, this time with our good boy, Air. I missed you, Air.
I missed you all too. I am very sorry I was not feeling well last week.
Alright, you can take a week off, but it's alright.
No, my commitment is 100-fold, if not 1,000.
Wow, that's intense. I feel like I've got to up my game now. And what better way to up my game than by going on a dungeon crawl? Let's get deep down in this dirty, dirty dungeon and find some sick
Why has it gotta
loot.
be dirty, though?
Because it's ancient and forgotten.
Oh boy.
And all the cleaning staff quit long ago.
My dungeon is new and invigorating because soon it's going to be a movie. I would like to gush about Ready Player One. I just started listening to the audiobook read by my personal hero, Will Wheaton. And I noticed some interesting overlaps in some of the content with Dungeons and Dragons. And I thought that some of our listening audience might appreciate some of the allusions in this book. So if you have a chance, go watch the movie or read the book.
Would you say it's an engaging audiobook?
Yes, I am one that is engaged thoroughly by audiobooks, and I was overwhelmed with cheerfulness and happiness when I heard Will Wheaton's voice begin speaking.
So I got a question. Do you like Ready Player One or do you like Will Wheaton's reading?
Isn't that an interesting question? I have listened to audiobooks vocalized by Will Wheaton before, so it gives me a good endorphin rush to hear those dulcet tones.
They're good tones.
They're good tones,
Quality
Jay.
tones.
Totes.
They're top tier tones.
Whoa. I need you to back off.
You want me to top off talking about top tier tones?
Wow.
I also do words good.
All right. Well, that's good. I have heard many things about Ready Player One, and some of them are good. Well, I wanted to talk about a few really cool DM tools that I have been recently very fond of. I will link all of these things on the Tweetzors, and of course in the chat as well. This one, my players, the people in this podcast should already be aware of. This is one that I've really been using a lot lately as I'm gearing up a new campaign and preparing a bunch of new NPCs very, very quickly. This has been extremely helpful. It is called This Is Your Life. It is a section of Xanathar's Guide to Everything, where you roll on random tables, and it generates you a character. It'll generate their age, their backstory, their history, and things. Obviously, you can select some of those things yourself if you have things that you already want in this character, but it helps flesh out a concept very, very quickly, very, very easily. You can get traits, ideals, bonds, family members, the reason they're adventuring, their age, all sorts of intimate details about this character without having to actually work super, super hard. And it's extremely varied, so no two NPCs are ever really going to come out the same. This is your life. It's an incredibly useful tool in Xanathar's Guide to Everything. There are two that are pretty quick and simple to talk about. The first is a spellbook generator, which is extremely useful when you have a wizard in your party for the first time in a very, very long time, and you suddenly have to worry about, like, oh, I have to feed this guy spells every so often. So I have found a great website that does spellbook generation. You pick the wealth of the target, you pick the level of the target, and the school that they are proficient in, and it will generate you a spellbook that has more or less spells depending on if they're a poor NPC or a rich NPC, and things like that. It's very, very useful. And I would definitely recommend that you have that if you have a spellcaster in your party. Or just to flesh out a NPC spellcaster that you're making an enemy, if you want to have a more varied and interesting spell selection without just going through the spellbook and reading and comparing and actually building a spellcaster spell list, this is an easy way to get that. And then last but not least, I have a great tool, probably my favorite tool recently, in Volo's Guide to Everything. Nope.
Yep, I want that book.
In Volo's Guide to Monsters, there are stat blocks for many of the player classes, which I think are very interesting and useful so that you can have quick, easy-to-use replications of a player class. Well, somebody has actually gone through all 82 published 5th edition subclasses and made a stat block NPC for each of those.
Oh,
wow.
So if you want to have a Bladesinger NPC enemy, you can just go to this page, look up Bladesinger, and jump straight to the Bladesinger. And it will just give you a very quick and easy Bladesinger stat block, so you can always have whatever class you need in stat block NPC form.
This is right in my wheelhouse.
This is super duper useful to get NPCs right off the bat. I mean, if the players start, pissing off a character you didn't intend for them to fight, and you suddenly need a barbarian stat block, this will give you all 6 different kinds of barbarian.
I didn't even know there was a cold jarg barbarian.
Well, they're given different names, but yeah, they're basically you'll see in the description of them what they are like. And because of legal reasons, they can't exactly use the exact content of the books.
Gotcha.
So they have to rename things a little bit, but if you read the features, you'll kind of understand what each one is filling the role of. But yes, all 82 playable subclasses are represented in this. They don't do the ones that are already in Volo's Guide to Monsters. So they don't replicate the work that Wizards has already done. But they give you the other 60-something that are not in there. An incredibly useful tool that I absolutely love. And those are a few tools that might help you out in your DMing in the future. So I hope that you get some use out of these things.
Very cool.
Ship it.
My DM's toolbox will be open to you once again at a future date. This is why your cell phone is probably the most powerful thing you have as your DM preparation kit. It's just, you gotta follow communities like RD&D and RD&D Next. They are always posting really amazing stuff just like this. That's done. Let's move on to the next roll call.
This is where we talk about a race and or maybe a class that we think you want to hear about.
That's a way to do it.
That's what happens when you put your icon on the spot.
If I may, because we, dear listener, decided to dig deeply
One listener
into the Well of Dragons, the Dragon Well. We went back to the Dragon Well, and we plumbed its depths so deep we went right back to the beginning, trying to find out where the heck did Dragonborn come from.
I'll stop you there. it's important. It's an important question, so we're gonna drop it right in here.
Oh, do it.
A question from RD&D on the Reddits. Can someone explain the difference between the kobolds and the Dragonborn's origins? This is submitted by Chronicle Rope.
Do we want to talk about the lore difference or the actual origins difference?
Well, I want to get into the origins, and I want to direct you both to what I think is the most pertinent piece of this document we've been looking at, which is on not even one of the numbered pages, technically page 2. I want you to look on page 2 at who the design manager for this document we have been looking at is. So we went way back to the source of Dragonborn, which comes from a 3.5 era supplement called Races of the Dragon. And many of the names in the credits I did not recognize. And I was glad for that, because this document is, I want to be kind when I say
Very
intriguing.
Mm-hmm.
But the design manager on it was one Christopher Perkins.
Do you have a pub date on this bad boy?
2006.
2006,
Wow.
yes.
12 years ago.
So this was at the tail end of 3.5.
This illustrious team brought us Races of the Dragon. And can I tell you that the joy that has been brought forth this day. Looking through this, I can't fully put into words. By the time we got to the 8th page and saw someone being reborn as a dragon from a shell, stretching out, naked.
As the day they were hatched?
Born, yes, as Dragonborn. Scales glistening in the sunlight. It is god-awful.
It's an interesting
read.
Style set that they've selected.
Dragonborn in this time period early on could be born of any race who decided to become a dragon. So there's a picture here I'm looking at.
An incredible photograph
of a female dwarf Dragonborn, of a gnome or possibly halfling Dragonborn.
I just love that halfling Dragonborn. He's so tiny. He just looks like somebody shrank a normal-sized Dragonborn.
The head...
His proportions are all the same.
The head is so disproportionate to the rest of the body. And I also love that he's dual-wielding a sword and a bow. I don't know how that's going to work.
Maybe that's an arrow?
It could be an arrow.
It's a bad arrow.
So then where do Dragonborn come from if you can have so many different racial varieties? What sets Dragonborn apart?
So these Dragonborn, at least back in the day, had to go undergo the rite of rebirth. Pledging themselves to Bahamut, they would enter an egg of their own making and reflect upon their choice to serve Bahamut in life as a dragon person, and then they would emerge fully formed, victorious as a Dragonborn. Yes. They went into an egg. There is an entire section
for Easter, I think.
It is, you know.
Hang on, I need you guys to really take a moment and appreciate the fact that these fully grown adults sat inside an egg for 24 hours.
Their faith was strong, Jay.
That's
what we need to know.
Yeah.
They were like, you know what, Bahamut, this makes total sense. I'm gonna just sit inside an egg and meditate for 24 hours, and all of my body will be converted into dragonkind.
Shall we return to the amazing land of 5th edition?
Well, we have to make a pit stop in the mediocre land of 4th edition.
Can I get one last dig in on this lovely book before we go forward? I am currently reading about Dragonborn grooming habits because these were the important details that they felt. Important. The new draconic skin feels soft and supple, the body vigorous. Direct quote, don't sue me.
Got that good dragon vigor.
Don't sue me, Watsy. Don't sue me.
I mean, here's the thing. If you're just humans that turned into dragons after sitting in an egg for 24 hours, you are basically scalies.
I mean, yeah, you know, this book is ahead of its time, Jay.
Indeed. They saw a culture on the rise, and they just decided to give them what they wanted. So before we follow these dragons through the editions, let me get to the heart of this question. What are the difference between Dragonborn and kobolds? Kobolds are the worshippers of all dragon kind. So in the original text, an original kobold is actually like a weird dog creature, but then I guess they thought that they had enough dog creatures, so they made it sort of more draconic. Made them the servants of dragons. So the kobold becomes this subservient creature that just sort of fulfills the needs of a dragon wormling. They help an egg hatch and then watch over it as it's young and then allow young dragons to grow to maturity and relative safety. They protect young dragons while they're a little more vulnerable than they will be one day. And that's sort of their purpose in both the fiction and in the game, is to be the grunts you fight before you fight a young dragon. Obviously, late game, you're not going to be fighting kobolds. But for your first young wormling dragon encounter, you'll be fighting kobolds first. Dragonborn, on the other hand, are literally like dragon humans. They're half dragon, half not anymore, but they're functionally speaking, they're dragon humanoids. They have scales, they have draconic features, they have big burly bodies, they're big boys, and they have draconic features, but they are still humanoid, they still speak language, they still have, 4 limbs and walk upright and things of that nature. So they're just playable dragons, It's like, I want to be dragon.
This is what the people want to know. What are the differences between Dragonborn and half-dragons? This I have not grasped yet.
So in 4th edition, they tried to divorce themselves from all of the old lore and to create their own wholly new setting, which was this Points of Light setting that they called the Ninter Vale. And in this, they were able to basically from the ground up create their own new lore, their new fresh lore. And they did that sort of like, DC's New 52, where they're rebooting the whole thing and they're just getting rid of all the old, really exhausting, super deep lore, and they're just doing a new lore-light world, Nintervale, that new players can grasp onto, and it didn't go over well with the old players, and it didn't really draw in the new players, so it didn't make anybody happy, exactly like DC's New 52. But as part of this, they promoted Dragonborn to its own thing, and in the Nintervale setting, Dragonborn and Tieflings had a long, ancient rivalry, where there'd been this Dragonborn empire, and Tieflings subverted it, infiltrated it, and brought it down from within using their demonic ways, caused the downfall of Dragonborn, and the Dragonborn were sort of in like a resurgence, like they were suddenly having all these Dragonborn born with wings, and it meant that they were on a new era, and they were about to reclaim their former glory, and that was sort of the plot of the 4th edition Dragonborn. And then in 5th edition, when they brought Dragonborn, I guess because they were popular during 4th edition, they kept Dragonborn as one of the main playable races. They just sort of incorporated that same kind of lore into the Forgotten Realms. They just said, oh yes, somewhere in the back past of the Forgotten Realms there was a Dragonborn empire and it fell. And so now the Dragonborn are remnants of that greatness. And that's sort of where they fit in. Half-dragons are literally a dragon turned into a human and then had relations with a human and made a half-dragon.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so they're like half-dragon. They are literally half-dragon.
Dragon.
Like
Yeah.
half elf,
Got it.
half
So they
orc.
half dragons generally are more draconic, so they have like more directly draconic. They have like big boy dragon breath and a tail and wings and all sorts of things.
Big boy
like
dragon breath?
Well, Dragonborn's
More
dragon breath.
powerful dragon breath?
I think that's what big boy dragon breath means, isn't it?
Sorry, big girls can have good dragon breath
too.
This is true. Big person dragon breath. But yes, so a half dragon generally has like a more powerful breath weapon and wings and tail and more fully featured draconic abilities.
Gotcha, thanks.
According to 3.5, the main difference is that dragons are warm-blooded and kobolds are cold-blooded. And that's it.
Interesting.
This book has no end to its
Dragonborn
wisdom.
are closer to mammals, which are humans, and kobolds are closer to reptiles, which are dragons? Interesting.
Yes.
Huh.
So kobolds are the pure... Wait, no, but dragons are warm-blooded? Dragons are closer to people? Kobolds are closer to lizards? I don't know. It's
You got
very
this. I believe in you.
complicated. I would. Your faith is misplaced.
So now that we've gone back to 3.5, let's head forward in time to 5th edition.
Yes, let's talk about Dragonborn that you could actually play.
How do Dragonborn kiss dough?
That's the truest question, and it's the most important question we will probably ask today. Getting back to the question,
comes
where do
from
Dragonborn come
Reddit.
The bottom part of the mouth splits open.
from? Oh, they have hinged jaws. They have...
Yeah, exactly. No, I'm just kidding. I don't know that. That's not true.
From Reddit user Jagerlart. Jagerlart wants to know, one of the players in a group I'm in asked a really valid question. With their snout things, how do Dragonborn kiss? Like, how does that work with their snouts? Like with other Dragonborns? Or with non-Dragonborns? Update. This was brought up because our DM said a Dragonborn kissed his wife, and we asked how.
This is one of those moments as a DM where you're just like, I didn't think this far ahead.
Her whole face goes into his maw. Like... Or vice versa.
This is actually funny because somebody actually did fan art today of Dinar and Cthulhu making out that ended up with Dinar just chomping on Cthulhu's head.
It's an important thing to remember when you're second face with a human.
Do not eat them.
Or elf, or
Yeah,
drow,
yeah.
or
Yeah, it's...
any of those.
Listen,
Exactly.
this is getting very tawdry. They have found each other, and I'm sure he falls asleep with his warm, acidic breath tickling the nape of his neck. And that's a tender moment, and we shouldn't sully it with this sort of...
They have very long tongues.
You just had to. You just had to.
That's my nightmare for tonight.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Should we talk about Dragonborn breath weapons?
Sure, so let's talk about Dragonborn as a playable race in 5th edition's Dungeons & Dragons. They're very good paladins.
Why is that, Jay?
Charisma.
And
They
strength.
get a bonus to charisma as part of their opening stat blocks?
Mhm.
Awesome. Cool.
They do, and they also get strength, right?
Yep.
Right?
Yes.
Yep, strength. So they get strength and charisma, which are both useful for a Dragonborn fighting class such as Paladin. They'd also make a good any other class that needs charisma. So you see a lot of Paladin, you see a lot of
Bards?
Warlocks, you
What?
see a lot of...
Sorcerers.
especially if you're going kind of a Gish build, a fighting caster. So like a blade lock. It's not necessarily as good for Bard because the strength really is sort of wasted, but hey, that means you don't have to spend 2 points to bring your strength up to 10, which means you have those 2 points to spend elsewhere.
And they've
Wow.
got the advantage of picking their draconic ancestry, so they can pick between the chromatic or the metallic, and that gives them a different breath weapon and a different resistance. So you can pick maybe one of the more common damage types like fire, which means you're resistant to something you're probably going to get hit by often, but you're also potentially spitting out something that a lot of creatures are either resistant or immune to.
Always pick the cone weapons.
The cone
Come on,
weapons are
guys.
very good. Early on, a Dragonborn early on has access to like a nice bit of AoE damage through their breath weapon, which can be really nice. It kind of falls off later on, but it's good flavor.
3d6 at level 11 is over decent range. It's not the worst thing in the world. You really have to have a bunch of bunched up enemies for it to be valuable. But, you know, if you're running low on spells or other things, you know, it's getting long in the battle, it can be okay. But yeah, it definitely is a lot more viable up front. As Amy T. Falcone once famously said, all that for 2d6.
All that for 2d6.
But
It's a lot. It's a long wind up. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, they obviously make awesome paladins. One of my favorite 5e paladins I have seen. Maybe this could have been my dungeon crawl, but it was somewhat off-put from time. Recently, Arkan the Cruel was featured. That is Joe Manganiello, if anyone knows him from True Blood or from the Magic Mike movies. He is a beefcakey type gentleman who is also an actor and a huge D&D nerd. And he guest spotted on Critical Role in their last season, and he plays a evil paladin of everyone's favorite hellbound dragon goddess, Tiamat. He is a very intriguing character, and he went into kind of why he made some of his character decisions and whatnot, and I think he's a really good character study in how to play a Dragonborn paladin, because he is very proud, he is very forthright, and terrifyingly powerful.
was he antagonistic to the party?
He helped them in the final battle, but then he also kind of screwed them. Don't want to release too many spoilers for the first season of Critical Role, but he definitely gets into why he made the decisions that he did at the end of his brief stint on there in the most recent, in one of the more recent Dragon Talk podcast episodes.
Gotcha.
Yep, so if you want real spoilers on there, go watch the Dragon Talk, because they will get deep into it, and it's a good show.
It is.
I have a lovely player in my new game that is a Dragonborn barbarian, and I am thrilled and tickled. It is a fabulous combination that you might not think goes great together, but does.
Yes, is playing maybe a less, Dragonborn are always presented as noble and clan-based and whatnot, and our friend Ember is playing this Dragonborn is essentially just constantly looking for snacks. That's pretty much the sole motivation thus far, and I love it.
Food's important.
Follows her nose. So getting back to questions, I want to address the elephant in the room, the draconic elephant in the room, the half-dragon, half-elephant that currently presides in the room.
That can exist in 3.5 edition, apparently.
Everything was half a dragon in 3.5. I'm half dragon on my mother's side. Dragonborn hate. Apparently, Dragonborn are actively disliked in certain corners of the D&D multiverse. This question coming from Almac, again on the D&D Reddits. I did not know until recently there were people out there who actively dislike Dragonborn as a player race, and I'm immensely curious about this, as someone who likes Dragonborn and finds a lot of the standard player races to be pretty insufferable. Why do some people feel this way about Dragonborn? Is it because they became a core character race in 4E and some people are opposed on the grounds of just hating on 4E and anything related? Why do you think certain people might dislike Dragonborn as a race?
There's certain sects of any fandom which will resist against change, and as such, certain classic races got pushed out of the PHB in 4th edition for Dragonborn, which is a new contender. Some very classic options didn't get featured, and Dragonborn did, and it was just kind of a little bit of that's weird. Why are they putting this new weird dragon race thing up over the thing that I want to play? And so I think that turns some people off right away, and I think the fact that it's a little more high fantasy versus medium or low fantasy also is a strike against it, because it's like, it's a short human or a wide human or like a long human. Those are things that we can kind of easily, be okay with. But like Scale Boy with fire breath is a little bit more extreme of a fantasy trope. So it kind of pushes your world out of the low fantasy world a little more into the medium fantasy to high fantasy.
There's some Tolkien fan who's crying somewhere. It's like, you got your long boy, your short boy, your squat boy, and your boy.
Yeah, exactly.
And your critical boy.
And your critical boy. That sounds like the opinion of the critical boy right there.
I still don't know what exactly a critical boy is.
A critical boy is a boy who loves Critical Role.
Oh, okay.
Oh, I thought it was a boy.
Okay.
I thought it was a pedantic boy. I thought it was a boy who...
It could also be like a critical boy. Yes, I see that now.
Reaching critical mass and might explode because of opinions.
He's,
Case of too much personality.
Yeah, I think that is a critical boy, a boy who is too much boy, and is approaching maximum boy, and will just implode in their boyness.
Oh boy.
Oh boy. Well played.
Where were we?
So looking through this thread, a lot of what you just said, Jay, seems to be kind of echoed here in terms of I don't like Dragonborn because I mainly find the concept of dragon people too weird and extraordinary. So that whole kind of high fantasy, mid to low fantasy thing, this person wants maybe more of a Game of Thrones, everyone is people, human kind of thing. I always feel get bad looks, Dragonborns and Tieflings, even a relatively high fantasy world, at least people from the outside of major cities like villages normally don't get to see them. I guess because they're exotic, and maybe it attracts a certain type of player to these exotic races, these races that have a kind of evil bent in their history, such so that you get maybe the Munchkin type player who wants to really lean in hard to these exotic things. Look at me, look at my scales. Hey, look, I can breathe acid. Isn't this great?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, certainly. This was also around the time that Tieflings became mainstream, so it really felt like Wizards was pushing a higher level of fantasy than maybe some people were comfortable with in their old school D&D. Because Tieflings had been consigned to supplementary books or, Planescape and all that stuff earlier.
Well, after digging into these 3.5 era Dragonborn, I remember listening to the Lore You Should Know on the Dragon Talk podcast about Tieflings, and they were also kind of a mixed bag. They were also very varied, and they might just have a set of horns, or they might have a patch of fur or something. They had some idiosyncratic element of their demonic ancestry. They weren't the kind of stock, quasi-devilish humanoid that we now associate with them in the 5e era.
You could be a tiefling of anything. You could be a hag descended tiefling. A tiefling was just anything with outsider blood. So it could get real weird. Now it's sort of assigned more to just the hellish dimension, just fiends and demons.
Yeah, primarily Asmodeus even, I think, is kind of the go-to
Yeah,
one.
Asmodeus is the main boy, but apparently we're about to... And then they've been releasing, a few tiefling variants with each edition, but apparently we're about to get a whole truckload of tiefling variants in Xanathars.
In Mordenkainen's?
Mordenkainen's, that's right. We're about to get a whole truckload in Mordenkainen's.
Can I ask the most important question?
You absolutely can, Shreka.
If you were playing a Dragonborn, what color would you be?
The min-maxer in me wants to say red or gold for that fire resistance. It's right there.
I think that for me, I would want to be a Dragonborn with a breath weapon that could be like applied to different kinds of scenarios. So I feel like I'd want to be like white, have ice, so I could just like freeze water and things like that. Like I could just try and use it for like out of combat stuff as I get higher level.
Ooh.
You know, having a little ice around can always be useful. Like, oh, I want to freeze this solid so that way I can like transport it for a longer distance or something like that. Things like that you can kind of use out of combat, because the breath weapon is not going to be that useful at higher level, but maybe you could use it to freeze a little patch of water that you could stand on, make something to like float on when you're stuck in the river or something. Who knows?
Be a little bit of DM Fiat, like be a green Dragonborn, and can I just some poison onto the tip of this bolt and fire it off?
That's it.
Some poison.
Or you could be one of the lightning tiefling, or one of the lightning Dragonborns, just like breathe some lightning into your swords.
It's like heat metal, except with lightning.
Yeah, there you go. I would be very interested in playing a Dragonborn specifically to do the voice, because Jay, you have a very good dragon voice.
Do I? Thank you.
You do. You want to give us a little taste of that flavor? We have a ancient red dragon who hounds us constantly in our campaign, and he sounds like...
Soon you shall know true terror.
There you go.
Yep, right now.
Right now. There it is.
Yep, totes.
That is those deep rumbling baritones.
I am Hundar.
It seems extra bassy today. I am.
It's very on point.
Because I don't have to do it for a long time, I can go real ham on it.
Ah.
Like if I had to do that for an extended period of time, it would be real bad. I would wake up the next day sounding a little bit like, hello, everybody.
Like too many smokers.
Yeah. I wanted to, I don't think my dragon voice, my Dragonborn or half dragon or any other variant dragon person, but I would try to do. I can't do it as good as you, though.
I like that. No, I like that.
Oh, okay.
Matt Colville has a cool version of Dragonborn too, where he really emphasizes the end of a phrase. So he's like, I'm going to the lower dark, and I will find this foe.
Yeah, it's very staccato. Yeah.
Yeah, it always like ends with a punch at the end of the phrase. I really like that. I thought that was it was a cool way to differentiate that you're doing like an accent for a specific creature.
Somebody has that accent in our game.
Yeah, I liked it so much that I stole it.
Druid?
I think I went with that one for the Leviathan when I was trying to differentiate him from the dragon, because I didn't want to do the same kind of growly voice for the Leviathan, so I think I went kind of like...
Yeah.
Druid, I try to go like raspy, like he's struggling to talk. Like that, because my idea is that his like throat is crushed in. So he's got that weird like straining death. I will ruin your lives.
Yeah.
Also terrified.
Cool. We should do a whole episode on this, and
on
we
character
should get a
accents,
guest to talk about to come in and talk about how they train with accents, and it'll be amazing and the best episode that we'll ever do.
There you go.
It's called Talking to Yourself in the Shower. That's pretty much it. And in the car.
So Dragonborn have they're obviously an outsider perspective. They're a unique perspective in the world because they're not as humanoid as everyone else. So they're a little bit different. And they have that relationship to a very dangerous, very powerful creature. And so you instantly have to start contextualizing within your character, like, how do I feel about dragon? Like, am I a super devout worshiper of Bahamut? Am I a super anti-chromatic dragons? Am I for chromatic dragons? Do I hate my dragon blood because I'm a chromatic color and I hate chromatic dragons? Those are kind of things that you start thinking about immediately, and your relationship to dragons becomes a central element to your character, and it makes you sort of a little bit abstracted, and it does, like those people were complaining about, it does lend itself more to a kind of a high fantasy campaign set vibe, because now you're dealing with these dragon men, and you're most likely going to deal with a dragon at some point because you've got a Dragonborn in your party.
I wanted to say that for DMs, races like this, if you're looking for a way to try to, I won't say normalize, but find a way to work in these really high fantasy races into might be a more medium fantasy campaign. Another thing Koval's done is he made his Dragonborn creations. They are part of a race that were created for war, the noble dragon phalanx or something like that, made by a previous ruler. So being a Dragonborn in his campaign is innately a very special thing. It is, it means something in that world. So things like Dragonborns or Tiefling or Aasimar, all these characters that have mixed blood ancestry can have a very interesting, it might be a great jumping off point for creating dynamics and social tension within your campaign, to use them as an underclass, as a second class citizen of sorts.
Yeah, I think if there's anything in your fantasy world that you're having trouble incorporating, saying a wizard did it is a very good way to do it. I have a potato in my current party, and I made a bet. I lost the bet. Now I've got a potato
You have
character.
this anthropomorphic spud.
The basic conceit of this character is he has no idea about the origins of his race, really. He just knows that they all grow up around an old abandoned wizard's tower. So at some point in the history, the wizard in there must have done something to make potato people. But that's his origin story as far as the origins of his race.
Is it like a veg-a-pygmy situation?
Yeah, he's got little root feet.
That's cute.
He's got little roots for feet. And then he's got little vines for arms.
Oh, he's a Pokemon. Oh.
And potatoes have eyes all over their body, so he's got seeing down pat.
Does he not? Can he not get surprised?
Yeah, he actually has advantage on perception checks. He has psychic communication. He talks through his mind instead of, because he doesn't have a mouth.
Well, we've come a long way. This was a strange journey today, from dragons to potatoes. Yeah.
Dragonborn, summing up, long story short, please God read Races. Races of Dragon. It's a hysterical book. It's so weird. The art is
Special.
Interesting.
Helpful.
It is.
Yeah. Beautiful.
You have no idea just how many dragon-type individuals there are out there until you dig into this quality title.
Page 73.
Page 73.
It will haunt my dreams.
My favorite is the one with the different races, all his Dragonborn, and that tiny little dragon there. I just can't get over it. He's so small.
He's wee.
He's little.
He's a wee boy.
Yeah, and apparently all Dragonborn are, as soon as they come out of that egg, they're all adults. And they don't age until they turn 200.
It's got that Shazam kind of element to it. I also love the spell scales. The spell scales are they're weird, melty-faced kind of dragon people, but they're also magic. Oh, it's so awful.
So gross. They don't look good. Ugh, God. And then the psionics. Oh, God. It reminded me of psionics. 3.5, guys. It was a wild ride.
Can I understand a quote? I think this speaks to...
Winston Churchill once said...
The writers of Races of the Dragon once said, when it comes to half-dragons and love, the desire for companionship and acceptance aches in the breast of a half-dragon, but at the same time, it flounders in a sea of anguish.
Goodness.
So emo.
So
the most
emo.
emo.
Half dragons are so emo.
They
So
are...
wait, so now all half dragons need to be in a band.
Yeah.
Half dragons are
Bands.
edgelords, confirmed.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Black scales. Yeah.
Okay.
My name is Razorwing Blackscale.
Yeah.
Both my parents were killed by a black dragon, and I have black dragon scales. Oh, the anguish!
Who is this? I hate. See, really, the hate of the Dragonborn comes from their innate hatred of themselves.
Yeah, I think the half dragons may be getting the misdirected hate towards the Dragonborn.
Could be.
If you guys want to hate on anybody, go back in time and hate on the half dragons.
We do not officially... Insight Check Pod does not officially endorse the hatred of any dragon-type individuals.
Especially not using time travel.
Hashtag we are joy.
Hashtag use time travel to kill Hitler.
Whoa, okay, that's probably a good idea.
Thank you all for joining us for another episode of Insight Check. As always, we are thankful to Amy T. Falcone for our faces. If we weren't for you, we wouldn't have faces. As the Dear Cupcake says. Now, as well, we would like to thank Vinswept for our incredible outro and intro music, Never Stand Alone, an incredible jam, and it has a vocal version. Some people don't know this. It's vital information to your... We would love if you could drop comments on iTunes. We need those to help spread the word and to get us a rating, which is going to help us grow the show over the long term. If we have given you any joy at all, take a few minutes and do that if you don't mind. We'll be eternally grateful.
We're super excited to have Scarlet Moth on next week's podcast. Stay tuned.
As well, we would love if you would leave questions or comments or concerns on our Twitter so that we can answer those in future episodes. We are always trawling the hashtag and our mentions for any interesting questions and insights that we can grant.
Answering your cues from our collective A's.
This
was Insight
Check!
Oh man, Jay, there's a lot of chaff and not a lot of wheat this week.
It's all wheat.
We got off on the boy train. You're welcome.